Ukrainian drones slammed into their target, leaving Russia's transport hub paralyzed in a sea of fire. But the real shock came right after. Can you guess what it was? In the dense fog at 3:42 a.m., Kupiansk was wrapped in a suffocating silence. Empty streets, dim yellow lamps casting hazy shadows. Just 14 miles from the Russian border, this quiet masked the storm about to erupt. The target, a steel bridge across the Oskol River in the massive southern transit hub, the very lifeline of Moscow. Nearly 700 feet long, its steel pillars loomed faintly at dawn. Beneath, the cold Oskol surged, silently shielding the danger drawing near. This artery pumped artillery shells, rockets, diesel, and tank parts to the Luhansk front. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next videos. Just half a mile away, the transfer station loomed like a colossal industrial maze. Freight trains arrived endlessly, one every 2 hours. Trucks lined up under blazing headlights, unloading their cargo. Soldiers hunched over, hauling crates beneath canvas covers. The entire site moved with the precision of a giant machine, unaware that disaster was closing in. From above, Ukrainian satellites captured every detail. Piles of ammunition, clusters of fuel drums. It was a clear sign. Russia was preparing for another assault on Lyman. But tonight, this was no longer a warehouse. It was a target waiting to be torn apart. Through the thick fog, a deadly force was quietly closing in. For Moscow, the Oskol Bridge and the Kupiansk transfer station were more than steel and concrete. They were the beating heart of the supply line. If lost, all logistics to Lyman would collapse, forcing every shipment onto trucks. And that meant one thing: slower, weaker, and far easier to destroy under Ukraine's precision blade. Knowing the risk, Russia built a wall of steel. On the western bank, a Panzer S-1 air defense system lurked in the dark, its 30mm cannons and missile tubes aimed skyward. Less than a mile away, a 1LL-122 radar swept the air, scanning for any stray heat or radar signature. Yet no matter how fortified, every defense line has its crack. Russia had erected a forest of floodlights, sweeping across the rail yard like a colossal prison of light. But light is useless in the fog. No matter how precise the plan, the battlefield always belongs to those who understand its blind spots. And tonight, the fog was more than thick. It had become the invisible ally of the attacker. The damp, cold air pressed down on the valley. The temperature hung at 37 degrees, visibility barely 100 feet. Enough to hide a single man, let alone an entire squadron of drones skimming the water's surface. Out there, in the white void, a pack of hunters closed in on their prey, waiting for the moment to tear through the night with steel and fire. And if you want to witness more moments as breathtaking as this, subscribe now. This war has only just begun. Russia's defense system was ready for battle, but not for a fight like this. Across the ridge, Ukraine's strike package was already inbound. 18 attack drones, a mix of Beaver and Scythe, each armed with precision-guided warheads. They didn't come high, they didn't come fast, they came silent. At just 20 to 30 feet above the ground, the drones skimmed the river's surface like ghosts, the water itself becoming a natural radar shield. The formation split into 3 directions. 2 groups veered toward the transfer station to ignite the fuel and ammunition depots. The last one hugged the river, aiming straight for the Oskol steel bridge. Six drones in the final wave raced toward their lethal objective, the Oskol Bridge. If they struck, Russia's entire supply line would be crippled for weeks. They slipped into the tree line, threaded beneath abandoned power lines, and aimed straight for the steel span. Their cold silhouettes were the final period on Moscow's logistics dream. Each drone carried hybrid guidance tech, GPS, inertial sensors, and 3D terrain maps. Even with Russian jamming active, they flew like invisible arrows. Electric motors hummed, their sound swallowed by the night. They closed in, second by second, yard by yard, unheard, unforeseen. Fog had once been Russia's veil for covert movements. Now it had betrayed them. Floodlights sliced through the mist only to be swallowed by pockets of darkness. Radars showed nothing but meaningless clutter. Minute by minute, the swarm of drones closed in, turning an entire Russian base into an invisible prey awaiting slaughter. Then they entered the death ring. Bridge, transfer station, fuel depots, all set to blow nearly simultaneously. Russia would have no time to adapt. No escape routes, no way to hold the supply line. A few hundred meters remained, the dark shapes racing in absolute silence. Destruction stood right at the threshold. And then, the first arrow of death was unleashed. 3 Beaver drones, each armed with a 66-pound concrete-piercing warhead, rose from the tree line, locking onto the Oskol bridge pillars. At 3:46 a.m., the first drone slammed into the eastern pillar, detonating like a siege cannon. The shockwave rattled windows 2 miles away, the sound of Hell's Gates opening. Seconds later, the second drone struck the western pillar, its blast tearing chunks of concrete apart, twisted steel raining into the river below. Before the echoes could fade, the third drone dove straight into the center beam. Fire erupted, molten metal poured like a storm of shooting stars. The entire valley roared with the agony of bending steel, a dirge for what was about to end. On the western bank, the Panzer S-1 jolted awake. Its radar spun, missiles stood upright, and the 30mm cannons roared under a rain of fire. But they weren't aiming at the real threat. They had been deceived by a decoy scythe drone. It broadcast false signals, diverting attention. The Russian gunners poured their fury into a ghost. And in those few seconds of life and death, the real drones slipped calmly through the wall of fire. By the time Russia realized the mistake, it was too late. The bridge pillars had cracked open, the steel beams bent like a bowstring about to snap. The valley echoed with the groan of tortured metal, a requiem for a bridge breathing its last. And with that, Russia's steel lifeline was severed in just 60 seconds. But that was only the overture. On the water, 3 more Beaver drones raced in, each carrying a concrete-piercing warhead locked onto the central pier. If that pier collapsed, the entire bridge would fall into the river like a rotting carcass of steel. They skimmed the surface at no more than 15 feet, invisible to radar. In the fog, they were little more than blurred shadows. Then, in unison, they popped up and shot toward the central pier. Once they made impact, the thousands of tons of reinforced concrete and steel would have no chance of holding.
Defense capabilities, it successfully test fires a precision-guided missile launched from...
Only 300 feet from the target, the electric motors screamed like blades tearing the air. The formation surged, hitting 120 mm. The first drone detonated like a cannon, shredding the concrete pillar. The shockwave rolled through the valley, rattling windows half a mile away until they shattered like ice. 3 seconds later, the second drone dove, piercing straight into the steel core. Then the third, without hesitation, struck the same weak point. The blast hurled steel and concrete fragments, a choking cloud of dust swallowing the river. On the western bank, Russia's Panzer roared to life. Radars swept, cannons spun and emptied their barrels in a frenzy, but their rounds tore through nothing but air. Because at that exact moment, the decoys had drawn every gun away. A flawless strike, cold and surgical. Can you feel that brutal precision in every passing second? Tracer rounds tore through the fog, carving searing lines of fire, but every shot chased ghosts. The Russian guns had locked onto 2 decoy drones, their false signals dragging the fury away. Meanwhile, the real strike group had already vanished from the kill zone. Mission complete. The bridge still stood, barely. Its core was shredded, its steel bleeding under strain. Every second brought it closer to collapse. But this was only the prelude. Seconds later, 12 more drones emerged from the south, spreading wide like the blades of a fan, diving straight toward the Kupiansk transfer station. From above, the facility gleamed like a maze of light, silent, radiant, unaware of its fate. In moments, it would ignite into a blazing inferno, where iron liquefies and concrete turns to dust. With the bridge mission complete, the remaining swarm dove straight into the logistics hub. The whole facility looked like a glowing maze of steel, packed with trains, containers, and fuel tanks.
Troops, food, ammunition,
but in minutes, it would erupt. The quiet night turned into a furnace, burying Moscow's supply lifeline in flame.
It's the second highest.
The first wave struck the fuel area. 6 scythe drones hit like knives, each carrying a 44-pound warhead that punched clean through the steel tank skins. Chain explosions followed, a torrent of red fire. The entire fuel depot became an inferno, flames roaring hundreds of feet into the night sky. Then came the next wave, sweeping across the container rows. 3 drones slammed directly into units marked with explosive symbols. The blasts tore open steel shells, igniting fuel that spilled into an adjacent train loaded with artillery shells. In seconds, the yard became a giant chain reaction cannon. Explosions thundered in relentless waves, ripping the night apart. Train cars shredded, steel fragments whirled through the air, and black smoke billowed skyward. Shockwaves toppled floodlight towers, plunging half the yard into darkness. Chaos erupted. Russian soldiers scattered in panic like ants from a shattered nest. Russian soldiers screamed amid the chaos. Some dove behind barricades, others froze, staring at the inferno consuming the night sky. Air defenses tried to swing the Panzer guns toward the incoming swarm, but the mix of fire, smoke, and flying debris turned their radar into useless static. In less than 2 minutes, the fuel depot became a massive crater of fire. Containers burned to ashes, rail cars were torn apart, and the air turned thick with the stench of burning oil and cordite. The blaze devoured the entire compound, yet the drones kept coming. Through the roaring secondary explosions, the Oskol Bridge finally gave way. Its central pillar cracked open. Concrete screamed under pressure, and steel beams snapped, collapsing into the freezing river below. Precision, devastation, silence after the storm. If your heart's still pounding, subscribe now. The next battlefield is already waiting. The collapse didn't strike all at once. It thundered in waves like the dying breaths of a colossal beast. 30 seconds dragged on like a century as concrete dust blanketed the river and the air trembled with the sound of metal cracking. Then came the terrifying snap. The 2 15-foot bridge spans shattered and plunged down, throwing up towers of water and shards of steel that flared in the inferno's glow. The railway line was now completely severed. At the Kupiansk station, devastation was everywhere. Satellite data later confirmed that 70% of the facility had been destroyed. 14 ammunition cars were gone. Only twisted, blackened frames remained scattered across the ruins. Over 40 containers burned fiercely. The fuel depot vanished, leaving behind only a massive pit of fire and thick black smoke curling into the eastern sky. Tonight, Moscow's steel lifeline was broken. Russia's entire supply network has turned to ashes. The logistics communication lines have fallen silent. In the darkness, only the roar of burning metal and the echo of collapsing steel rolled through the valley. As dawn broke, Russian commanders faced a true nightmare. The bridge had sunk beneath the river. Kupiansk station was reduced to ashes, and the main railway to Lyman was completely severed. Analysts estimated it would take at least 3 weeks to restore even a temporary route. During that time, every bullet, every drop of fuel, every tank component would have to be transported by truck. The detour route stretches an extra 95 miles, across open highways and narrow villages, all well within the lethal range of Ukrainian artillery and drones.
Troops from the region after the enemy seized land during a surprise incursion in August of last year. The state